2024 Upper Yellowstone Channel Migration Map Tutorial Part 2, Channel Migration Maps and Online Interactive Web Map. This is the second of a two-part video tutorial on the 2024 Upper Yellowstone River Channel Migration Map. This presentation is being given by Montana Freshwater Partners, a nonprofit organization based in Livingston, Montana. You can learn more about us at freshwaterpartners.org. First, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the DNRC grant that paid for the development of the 2024 Channel Migration Map, the consultants who created the map, and a special thanks to Montana Trout Foundation for supporting the production of this video. In the first video tutorial, we covered channel migration concepts, what it is and why it's important. We also talked about the risks of building in the channel migration zone and what you can do to minimize those risks and minimize your impacts on the river. Part 1 finished up with some additional sources of information about living and working along the Yellowstone River. In this second video tutorial, we're going to dive into the channel migration map, and I'll explain the key map features and how you can access the maps, the report, and the GIS data online. I'll also give you a tour of the online interactive map so you can learn how to zoom into your area of interest, explore historic channel alignments, and print custom maps. Before we jump into the maps, let's quickly review what channel migration is and a few of those mapping concepts. So this cartoon that we see here shows the location of the Yellowstone River over the last 75 years or so, and this combined area is what we call the historic channel migration zone. Channel migration zone maps illustrate where the river has been, where it is located now, and where it is likely to move or migrate towards in the future. So the difference between channel migration maps and floodplain maps. Channel migration maps are non-regulatory, meaning they are not tied to any regulations in Montana, nor do they trigger new regulations. These maps are based on mapping and measuring from historic imagery and are super cost effective for communities to develop for their local rivers. Channel migration maps show you what areas are at most risk of migration-related hazards like erosion and avulsion. Channel migration affects properties that are located in flood hazard areas as well as areas that are not in flood hazard areas. Floodplain maps, on the other hand, are really focused on flood hazard areas and identify what areas are going to get wet with flooding. Flood maps are regulatory, and building within the regulated floodplain is controlled at the local, state, and federal level and requires various permits. Together, these maps provide property owners with a more complete understanding of the flood and erosion risks associated with their property and are intended to be used as a source of information to help people make informed decisions. The maps are available for anyone to access online for free, and I'll show you how to do that in just a few minutes. So here's what the channel migration map looks like, and I'll go over these different features in a moment, but first we'll quickly step through how this map was created. The first step of creating a channel migration map is to identify and map where the river has been located over time using historical aerial photos. The area where the river has occupied over the years is called the historic channel migration zone. Those historic aerial images are also used to measure the distance and direction that the river has moved over time. This is used to estimate the future erosion potential along the river bankline and is highlighted as the erosion hazard area on the map. This gives you a buffer or an indicator of what areas along the river are going to be more prone to bank erosion based on the direction and speed the river has been moving since the 1940s. Avulsion hazard zones highlight low-lying areas along the river that are at higher risk of channel avulsions, which occur when the river rapidly abandons its channel and carves a new course. Channel migration maps also identify geotechnical hazards, and for this map, this term is used to identify areas that have steep vertical banks within the channel migration zone to encourage people to give these vertical banks in high-risk areas plenty of room. And lastly, all of the existing bank armor along the river in Park County was also mapped, and a restricted migration area was applied to these areas to show that there are still channel migration risks in these areas, even though the bank is armored to restrict that movement. So along with aerial photos, the mapping process also considered what type of bank material makes up the bank lines in a given location, since some materials are more resistant to erosion than others. Topography was also a key source of information to distinguish between low-lying areas versus elevated areas. All right, here is what the mapping process looks like. It starts off with aerial imagery dating back to the 1940s, and for each year of available imagery, the channel alignment was mapped. Here's the channel alignment of the Yellowstone River at Point of Rocks in 1948. The same thing was done for this location using imagery from the 1970s, 1990s, and the 2000s. And we continue that process through 2023, and here is what that same location looks like in 2023, all mapped out. Then through the magic of GIS, we combine all of those channel alignments that were mapped since the 1940s and merge them together to create the historic channel migration zone. With nearly 80 years of historic channel alignments mapped, we were able to measure how many feet the river has migrated since the 40s and in which direction it moved. So the yellow and red arrows that we see on this map are migration vectors. They show both the direction and the distance the river has shifted over time in a given location. The yellow arrows show how far the river moved between 1940 and 2022, and the red arrows show how far the river moved just during that 2022 flood, helping to illustrate just how significant that event was in certain areas. And when you look at the yellow and red arrows together, you can see the total amount of movement that the river has made since the 1940s. And here's what the completed channel migration map looked like. We have the current channel alignment of the Yellowstone River based on 2023 aerial imagery in light blue, and the historic channel migration zone in dark blue. The erosion hazard area is highlighted in orange and is 100 times the average annual rate of channel movement for that particular location. The erosion buffer is wider in areas where the bankline is made up of more erosive materials like gravels and cobbles, and narrower where the material is composed of more resistant material like boulders or bedrock. A restricted migration zone was mapped behind armored bankline features like rock riprap and levees. So those yellow triangles and red dots here, and the restricted migration area behind that. And this is indicating that these areas, while restricted, are still prone to erosion, as we saw in those bank armor failure examples that were shown in part 1 of this video series. The pink areas are avulsion zones, and these are those low-lying areas along the river that are prone to avulsion risks, where the channel could make a sudden shift in alignment and cut a new channel, or reoccupy a historic side channel. The dashed black lines in the avulsion hazard areas are swales or side channels pathways to be aware of. Lastly, we have the geotechnical overlays, which are used to highlight the steep vertical bank lines. A 2-to-1 slope was applied to these areas and are illustrated in that black hatch mark. Okay, so we have this interesting map, but how is it useful and what can we do with it? So if you are a realtor or a developer or someone who's looking to buy property along the Yellowstone, this map is going to be really informative in your property research. If you already own property along the river, you can use this map to do a cost-benefit analysis or a simple pros-cons list. If, say, you have a building or infrastructure that's located in the migration zone that you're worried about, and you're not sure if it's worth moving or leaving it where it is. This map will also be really key for siting and design considerations for future homes or structures, subdivisions, public infrastructure, and utilities, so you can make sure your investments are out of harm's way. And this map can also be used for restoration planning and design. All right, let's shift gears and go online to the Montana State Library link and look for the report, all of the maps, GIS data, and the interactive web mapper. So you're going to open up your internet browser, you'll type in a search, something like Yellowstone Channel Migration Map, and you might see one of 2 montana.gov links. You're going to want to go to this link. This is the Montana State Library. You might see a link that takes you directly to the Yellowstone Channel Migration Zone project page, or you might see a link that takes you to the main Montana Migration Zone page. So let's go there. You're going to see that the state actually has quite a few completed channel migration zone maps across the state. We're going to go to the Yellowstone River project. So this is the project page just for the Yellowstone River, and this is going to include data from the 2009 Channel Migration Zone Mapping Project as well as this updated project just for Park County. Now, the 2009 project actually mapped the Channel Migration Zone from Gardner all the way down to the confluence of the Yellowstone River with the Missouri out in North Dakota. And so you can always access that data, but we're just going to focus in on what were the new mapping for Park County. What you can also access on this project page is the GIS data that went into this map, so you can download the map project for that or individual shapefiles. You can also download the project reports that go with this map. For Park County, go ahead and download or open up this 2024 project report. Super informative, pretty easy to read, and really, really well written. You can also download the individual maps for the county if you just want to print those off at your printer. So those are all available to you. But let's go check out what this interactive map is all about. So click on this link. And then this is going to open up that online mapper. If you see this message, just go ahead and open in Map Viewer. And the initial page is going to show you all the Channel Migration Zone projects in Montana. All right, but we're just interested in the Yellowstone. You can see here the entire length of the Yellowstone. This is that 2009 mapping project, but we're just going to focus in on Park County for the 2024 updates. So I'm just scrolling in and out to zoom into this area. If I wanted to zoom in, I could also click on the plus button down here or the minus button, and I'm just clicking and dragging to navigate around. I could also zoom in straight to a certain location by clicking this search button, and you can type in your address, or you can type in the location of an area that you're interested in. I'm just going to type in Carter's Bridge. Let's see what pops up there. Carter's Bridge fishing access. Okay, now we got a zoomed in view of Carter's Bridge just upstream of Livingston, and I'm going to scroll down to where Deep Creek and the Yellowstone come together, because this is a really interesting part of the river, and we have all of the features of the Channel Migration Zone map illustrated here. So if these features don't come to mind right away, you got the legend here to tell you what they are. And we have the 2023 channel alignment in light blue here. We have the historic Channel Migration Zone in dark blue. We have all of those bank armored features showing up along with levees and dikes. We have the avulsion hazard areas in pink, restricted hazard areas behind those armored bank lines, as well as the geotechnical setback area indicating steep slopes, and those migration vectors. Now if you zoom into those migration vectors, you can see the difference between the yellow vector, which is indicating the distance and direction the river moved from the 1940s up to 2022. And then the red arrow is showing that distance and direction the river moved after the 2022 flood, or in direct result of that 2022 flood. And together these two arrows represent the total movement of the river since the 1940s. All right, so we've got the main features of the channel migration map here, and now I'm going to show you how you can kind of change some of the base maps so that you can compare the existing channel migration map with some different layers or base maps underneath there. So you're going to see on the left hand side there's a lot of different tabs here. We're just going to focus in on base maps and layers, but just know that you can do a lot of extra analysis with the built-in capabilities of this web map. But let's just go to base maps for now. We'll open that up, and now you're going to see all the different base maps that you can open up and swap out for this current aerial that we see right now. So let's go to topographic maps, and now we can see the topography underneath the channel migration zone. And one thing that you can do to help visualize things a little bit easier is you can actually make this channel migration map become more transparent by going to the property tabs, clicking on that, and then going to appearance. And here's where you're going to find a bar where you can adjust transparency of those layers. And so I'm just going to make that migration map disappear for a second so I can see the topography underneath, which is pretty interesting. And then you can adjust that transparency of the channel migration map and how that looks on top of it. All right, so I'm going to just bring that back to its normal transparency. And let's see what other types of base maps there are. There's all kinds of base maps that you can click on, but if you really want to go back in time and compare this current channel migration map with past conditions, you can scroll all the way down and get to these historic maps or historic aerials. And I'm going to click on this aerial from the 1940s. And this is going to show us what were the conditions between 1948 and 1950. And again, I want to see a little bit more detail on that aerial. And so I'm going to make this channel migration zone go away. So again, I'm in properties, I went to appearance, and now I'm using this transparency bar to move things out of the way. And what's interesting about this location is that the current channel alignment, the river is on the left side of the river bottom. But back in the 40s and 50s, the river was on the right side of the channel bottom. And so this is a super mobile area of the river, and we can see by these migration vectors that the river has actually moved over 870 feet towards the other side of the river bottom in this area. And this is why it's really important to use this channel migration map and really utilize the different historic aerials as part of your property research if you're looking to purchase or move into a new area. Okay, so I'm going to put the current base map back on, but another way you can look at this data is actually by removing some of these layers and putting on maybe the historic channel alignment so that you compare that to the existing conditions. So I've clicked on the layer button, and I'm going to expand all these layers. And you're going to end up seeing all of the channel migration projects in the state, but we're going to hone in on Yellowstone. We're going to scroll down to it, open it up, expand it, and here we're going to see all of those individual layers that make up this map. If you are new to using this sort of interactive mapper, on any of the layers, if you see an eyeball in it, that means that it's visible. And you can turn that off by clicking on it, and now a line goes through it and it disappears. So I'm just going to go through and turn off all of these layers. And you're going to start seeing those disappearing as I go through. And I'm really interested in kind of putting on some of these old river bank lines and historic bank lines. So I'm going to come back to that in just a moment, but I'm going to keep clicking off these layers until the area is cleared out. I'm actually going to put this outer boundary back on. All right, now let's go back to these historic river channels. I click that open, I can see all of the channels alignments that are available. I'm going to turn it on, and here they all are. Now I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to start clicking off these more recent channel alignments until I get down to the last one, which is the channel alignment for 1948 to 1950. And now I can see what did the channel look like back then relative to what I'm seeing today. I could also add on more layers if I want. So this one is from 99 to 2001. So some big shifts happening there. And I can add on a few more layers. This is 2021, and we can see that it's expanding even more in 2023. I could also turn on historic river bank lines just to make these things pop out a little bit more. So I can turn on that layer, make it visible, and now we have those bank lines outlined right here. From here, I can add data back in. So let's see what this looks like if we add the migration vectors back on, the restricted migration areas, the armored bank lines. Make sure that we have all of these vectors on, as well as the physical point features as well. And so this is telling us, okay, we've got these historic bank lines, we've got the existing alignment of the river, and now we can also see all of the bank line armoring and restricted areas that have gone into the river over time. And if we zoom out, we can really start to see how much this river has been armored over the years. And if you've watched part 1 of the video tutorial, we talked about how confining rivers over time will actually drive up the velocity and erosive force of future flood events. And so this becomes problematic. We start losing those dynamic processes of the river and that support the dynamic stability and resilience of the river over time. So this map not only provides that zoomed in close-up view of particular parcels, but it also allows you to zoom out and see the bigger picture of what is going on in the river. Super helpful. So if you decided, hey, I like this map, this is what I want to print out, you can go to the click button or the print button and click that, and it'll walk you through the steps to export this map with a legend and arrow key and everything, and export that to your computer so that you can print out that map. All right, so that's the interactive map, and let's go back to finish up this presentation. A couple other resources that I'd like to share with you. Another great website to look at while you're actually looking at this online map is the Montana Cadastral website. So this is the state's parcel information website. And if there's a particular parcel that you are interested in, you can open that along with the interactive mapper and use that to help find that specific location. Another great site is the Upper Yellowstone Watershed Group website. They have a Yellowstone River Recovery Basics story map. And this is a story map that was developed after the 2022 flood event. It has a lot of great information about river basics, permitting along the river, bank treatments, best management practices, and long-term restoration goals and strategies. And if you are interested in finding out more information about the 2022 flood event, on the Montana State Library, there is a 2022 GIS Data Flood Hub. And on this website, you can find all sorts of aerial imagery and video that was taken during the flood and various data sets that are related to that flood event. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us at info@freshwaterpartners.org, and be sure to check out the first video tutorial on Channel Migration 101 if you haven't done so. Thank you.